Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. I apologize ahead of time if the audio quality is not very good this week. I'm currently trapped in a locker in the Gold's Gym in Venice. I want to talk to you guys about Myco Hearn, aka Myco Tren. If you don't know who Myco Hearn is, it's almost easier just to go Google who he is and you can kind of get an idea of what he's about. But he's been a very prevalent figure in the fitness industry for probably 40 years, maybe even longer. He's in really good shape. He's done bodybuilding shows. He's competed in powerlifting. And he's one of those guys that's kind of in shape year-round, very strong. And so he's always been kind of a personality in the fitness industry. And for as long as I can remember, and as long as I've been aware of him, people have debated about whether he was natural or on steroids. And he claims to be a lifetime natural. And so obviously he draws a lot of attention. And if you haven't seen this guy and you go look at a picture of him, just know that he's in his 50s, and you'll kind of see why a lot of people are skeptical. He's probably around 250 pounds, pretty much always has six-pack abs, and he's looked like that for, as long as he's been in the public eye. So obviously a lot of people are skeptical about his claims to being a lifetime natural. I tried very hard for years not to fall into the habit of saying, well, he's so much bigger and so much stronger and leaner and more jacked than me or anybody that I've ever worked with. He has to be on steroids, right? That's kind of a temptation that a lot of people fall into. But I tried to suspend disbelief when it was maybe 10 years ago and he was a little bit younger, and you could say, well, maybe he just has these elite genetics. And I've also heard more than a few people who worked with him in podcasts say, well, he doesn't really get injured that often. And if you don't get injured, you can build a tremendous amount of momentum in your training. So I thought, hey, maybe he's just got the perfect genetics. Maybe he's been training really hard. He's never taken any time off because he hasn't gotten any serious injuries. And so he's just built himself up into this basically, granite statue of a person. But now that he's in his mid-50s, and within the past few years, he's actually gone through a few phases of gaining a significant amount of muscle and then leaning out in a way that you would not think that a 50-year-old can do naturally. So at this point in his career, at his age, it gets to the point where you say, okay, this guy can't possibly be natural unless he's just a one-in-a-lifetime, a one-in-a-generation freak, which, most people don't buy. And now, even for me, I try not to be a hater. I try not to be jealous of people who are doing very well. It does get to the point where it's like, yeah, the likelihood that he's natural is almost nothing. But I want to try and help you guys understand the predicament that Mike is in, and why you maybe shouldn't hate him and shouldn't revile him quite as much as a lot of people do. You see, Mike got involved in bodybuilding, lifting weights, that sort of thing, when he was very young. And from what I have seen, he's been on the cover of magazines and stuff like that way back in the 80s. And a lot of you guys who are younger and you've just gotten involved with lifting and fitness in the past maybe 5 years or so may not be aware of this, but not too long ago, steroids were one of the most taboo things that you could possibly do. It was as bad as doing meth or being some type of violent criminal. You have to go back and listen to the stories from people who trained at that time, or watch documentaries like Bigger, Stronger, Fast. There was so much, there were so many lies around steroid use, and there was such a false atmosphere of fear and disgust. And I'm not a fan of steroids by any stretch, but the way people thought about steroids just 10 or 15 years ago and all the years prior to that was way different than people think about it now. Now you have IFBB pros and professional strongmen who will do entire YouTube series about the steroids they use, and they're getting their blood work done so that they can use tren and growth hormone responsibly. You have guys like the Tren twins who kind of make a meme out of steroid use. And so it's become very normalized and people are very open about it. Testosterone use has become almost like this recreational thing. There's TRT clinics and hormone replacement therapy seemingly everywhere now. I know a bunch of guys who aren't even that serious about the gym, but they're just using TRT now. They're on testosterone. So the culture has changed tremendously in the past 3 or 4 decades since Hearn got involved with things. And even, I'm only 33. I remember when I was in high school watching a infotainment drama in high school, and they showed us Ben Affleck when he's very young taking steroids for the football team, and he goes into a rage and almost hits his girlfriend and breaks a bunch of stuff in his house. It was supposed to be showing kids the dangers of steroid use. You're gonna get roid rage and all these things. If you go back and watch a documentary like Bigger, Stronger, Faster by the Bell brothers, they show a professional football player who is dying of cancer, and the news at the time was basically portraying this guy as if he got cancer from steroids, which is not something that I think there's not really a strong correlation there. It was just people heard steroids and they thought, oh well, of course that's what's killing him. And even a couple of years ago, might have been 5 or 10 years ago now, I remember some police officer was charged with excessive force on a student at a school, and they found out that this cop was a power lifter and he was deadlifting 600 pounds. And in the news article, in the broadcast, the woman says this police officer was potentially involved with dangerous steroids like creatine. And if you know what creatine is, it's just a protein supplement. It's not a steroid. And so the point I'm trying to make is that not that long ago, there was this huge cloud around the idea of somebody taking steroids. A lot of it was nonsense. A lot of it was just trumped up dramatization based on things that just weren't true. And it was very, very taboo. And so if you were a professional athlete, if you were a bodybuilder, somebody involved with any type of sport where there were drugs, you had to lie about it. Because if you didn't lie about it, you'd be ostracized from the sport. You'd be banned and thrown out from the sport that you love and that you made money with. But it was also something that you weren't really allowed in polite society. If you were taking steroids, people would think badly of you and look at you badly. And so if you're a big, strong Hearn and you're getting involved in lifting in whenever it is, in the 70s or the 80s, and you're coming up and you're starting to be on the cover of magazines and things like that, and at some point you get introduced to steroids, the thinking for a lot of those guys is, well, this is just what I have to do to compete in the sport. It's just a part of the sport. Steroids is not necessarily something that you want to do, but if you want to be the best bodybuilder or powerlifter, you got to do it. That's just how it works. And so you take it and you say, who cares what anybody else thinks? This is what I want to do. And so you take it and you lie about it because that's the cultural expectation at the time, and that's what everybody else is doing at the time. Now, where Mike went wrong is he stayed relevant for too long. Most guys, if you take steroids and look great and you're on the cover of a few magazines in the 80s and the 90s, most guys aren't going to stay relevant for that long. They might move on to something else, or at least not be as famous as Mike is. But Mike got more famous as time went on. And as it went into the 90s and the 2000s and then into the 2010s, where social media is taking over and really becoming a huge part of the fitness game and a part of, our lives, Mike is now going viral again. He's becoming a meme. Everybody remembers the baby don't hurt me memes. And you can still go on Instagram and Hearn will pop up in the little GIFs that you can comment in the bottom. So people know of him. He's been seen. He's stayed relevant, and he's kind of been at the top of the fitness industry for a long time. But he's in this awkward position where over the course of 20 years or so, the culture has almost done a complete and total 180. Before, it was this forbidden thing to take steroids. Only cheaters and bad people and criminals did steroids. And now it's like, hey, why not do steroids? Everybody's doing them. Steroids are great. Why not get jacked and strong quick? And so if you started lying about your steroid use 20 or 30 years ago when everybody else was doing it, and now you just find yourself in this awkward position of, well, people are starting to be open and honest about it, but I don't want to go back and say that I was lying for the past 15 or 20 years. So what do? You can either double down or triple down or quadruple down, which Mike has done, or you can come out and say, yeah, I was lying. Everybody else was lying, and so that's what I did. And it's easy to say, yeah, you should just be honest. It's easy to say you should do the right thing and whatever. But if you're in the position that Mike is in, it's not so easy, where he's made a lot of money, he's got a reputation, and if he comes out and says, yeah, I was lying, even now that the culture is very open about it, it would probably draw him a lot of negative attention and shame, and it may even hurt him financially. So obviously it's not good that Mike's lying. I would prefer it if Mike came out and just, did a podcast or something and said, hey, yeah, I lied, and that's kind of what people did about their steroid use, and then things changed, and I didn't want to be known as a liar, so I kept lying, which I think, everybody's done to some degree at some point in their life. And so I feel kind of bad for Mike. I don't really love Mike Hearn. I'm not a huge fan. I think a lot of his fitness info is not necessarily fantastic compared to the rest of what's out there, but I do feel bad for him because I think he's kind of stuck in this awkward spot, especially now that not only are people very open about their steroid use, but there's kind of an expectation that you need to tell everybody that you're on steroids, otherwise other people are going to come after you. And there's entire YouTube channels dedicated to, is this guy natural or not? And, oh, look at this guy, he's a fake natural. And it's a tough spot to be in. So I don't think what he's doing is good, but I would say if you're maybe a little bit younger and you're not familiar with what the culture around lifting and steroids was like 15 years ago, maybe be a little bit slower to have hate and disgust towards somebody like Mike. I'm not saying you have to like him, just maybe relax a little bit because he's probably in a bit of a tough spot. And my hope is, as time goes on and online fitness and fitness culture in general kind of changes, less people will be in Mike's position where they feel the need to lie, and there can just be a more open, honest conversation about steroid use. And so we can be honest about it while not encouraging more people to do it, because I think most people agree it's pretty bad for your long-term health. And ultimately, we want to be strong, we want to be in shape, we want to be capable, but we also want to be healthy. So just something to think about. I don't know if this is a bad time to bring this up, but this video is sponsored by Hearn Enterprises, which is Mike Hearn's company. Now, a lot of people say that that's a conflict of interest, but I don't agree. And I think you guys should go and support Mike Hearn. I also think you should donate to IPAC and the Anti-Defamation League. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week.